Hey everybody, my name is Stephen Bird Summers, and I'm here again to talk about gaming and game design. This one's a little bit more personal for me because I've been blown up a lot, and I have a lot of things in my head that really get caught when I try to put it forth inside of a session. I tend to hyper focus on the wrong details, and I get really confused, like trying to get together all the stuff that I want to happen, all the stuff that's happening at the table, and still try to manage all my player expectations. So what I have done is I have tried to simplify the game building process outside of combat. Combat runs pretty much the way combat should run. Um, that would be a whole nother video, tips and tricks of how to do combat. But I really want to focus on exploration and social encounters. I found that games tend to come to a grinding halt because there's no real clear vision of what's going on. And if you remember, one of my big design principles is to facilitate conversations between the players and the GM that are meaningful. um, yeah, and I find that breaks down when we do exploration and social encounters because, again, for me at least, when I'm going on and I'm telling a story and I've got in my mind what I want to happen and what I think is going on and what I think the players are picking up on. And a lot of times when we pause the actions, people say, I'm really just kind of lost. I don't know what's going on. So, to that end, again, let me get right into the video. I want to talk about setting up some clear guidelines to make the whole process easier. And once we outline these processes, I think that creating entire campaigns should come together in a much more organic and natural way. So again, this is for people who are having trouble stringing together their social and their exploration content in between combat encounters. And this applies to multiple systems. It's very generic. I hate to say the word generic, but yeah, it's generic advice that can apply to multiple systems. Anything that uses skill systems, really. So whether you're going to be modding an existing campaign, creating your own, or just pulling off an improv scenario, there are going to be some universal basics that we're going to consider. I think the first place that we want to start is that as a game master, ultimately you want your players to succeed because if you didn't, well, why would we be playing? There are some sadistic people that love to see their players fail. I'm not one of them, and if you are, yeah, save yourself some time and go ahead and exit out of the video. Uh, but yeah, so you want them to succeed. Next, you want to make them work for it. You don't want to just hand it to them. You also want to have them give them hooks to learn more about the campaign, more about the lore that you want. I've also seen a lot of times we, as a GM, we like to go into exposition dump, and that can be very tedious, and players can just get that blank look on their face. And some of them they could even be interested. It's just the way that it's presented in just those giant lore dumps. It can really dissuade from the in character experience, the role playing experience. But still, as a GM, you want them to pick up on the lore. You want to pick up on what's going on in the campaign because that's what ties them to it. It makes them feel like they're a part of that world. Outside of that, you're going to want to make sure that you leave some room to both surprise your players and be surprised by them. And hopefully, somewhere on that list, you're going to want them to have fun. So, to execute all of that, the first thing that we really need to consider is shades of success. And everything we do from there is going to touch on this. Now, the shades of success, I don't know where it came from originally. I know I was introduced to it from the game Burning Wheel. And I want to share just a really brief overview of what I found in that. And that is here, shades of success. When crafting a scenario, it's absolutely critical that you have an understanding of your expected outcomes or victory conditions for that scene. If it's not for show or exposition, is it really necessary? What are the players getting out of the scene? Does it drive the overall narrative? What are your conditions and definitions for success? And what happens if the player fails? What is a marginal success? Squeaking by the skin of your teeth. What does that look like? It's important that you have to have shades of both success and failure to offer the players based on their progress. Keep these four outcomes in mind when determining the player's level of success, and feel free to drop either the top or the bottom one based on what the scene needs. Um, but when you're planning or you're improvising a scene, you have to allow your time. I'm sorry, you have to allow yourself the time to flesh out what each of these would look like. And you can even ask players what they think a critical success or a success with a cost or failure would look like to them. Maybe failure just results in combat. That's not a bad answer. That could totally be a thing. So when you have this, whatever system you use, there's going to be some kind of a bell curve for success, and that's oh, I did just a natural 20 in D&D or D20 systems, or if you have like a multiple dice, like oh, I've got multiple critical successes on my rolls, like whatever it looks like. When you get above whatever your target number is, we can call it a DC if you want, whatever it is. When your players just blow that out of the water, your player obviously gets what you want, and you've already determined, like if it's an information scene or a social scene, like you can say I have a list of information that the players can glean from this scenario. So when they meet that critical success, not only do they get everything they want, but they also get a bonus. Maybe they get everything they want, and the person that they're leveraging decides to become friends with them, and maybe gosh, I don't know. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Maybe it's an exploration scenario, and they find the trail, they avoid the monsters, they disable the traps, and they find a bonus treasure. Anything like that. You can, when you're plotting out your scene, you're going to know what you need, and you're going to know what's at stake, and you're going to be able to say, "Ooh, this is everything I want," and then this would be a really nice cherry on the cake for this. Cherry on the cake, cherry on the ice cream, whatever. I don't know. I like cherries on my cake too. Anyway, so that's critical success. They get what they want and they get a bonus. I tend to award extra XP. In my system, XP is gained one at a time. So in this, like any one of these exploration or social scenes, they get an XP just for encountering or just for navigating this scenario. And if they critically succeed, then they'll get an extra. So they'll get 2 XP for that scene. If you want to use an XP metric as a reward, you know, come up with a viable number that works with whatever system that you're using. So the next point is success. Okay, great. Players, they get all they want. I had 5 points of information that they needed to give them. Here it is. They get it. Congratulations. Take your information, move on to the next scene. Success at a cost. So in this one, the players like barely meet their difficulty class, their target number, their whatever it is. They barely make it, or they make it, or they miss it by like maybe 1. And it's to the point where you really want to reward them with the information they need to move forward, but it's going to come with a problem. Maybe like in a social scene, maybe they get all the information they get, but instead of the NPC wanting to befriend them and work with them in the future, maybe they made an enemy out of them. Maybe the NPC feels like they're being manipulated. Maybe the NPC wants revenge. Maybe the players used intimidation to it and they're going to hold a grudge. Whatever it is, it's going to come with a problem. Just think about that. Like in this scene where they have a near miss or a near success or whatever it is, like I really just want to add this complication in. Think about what would be organic for that scene. And then we come to the last one. So when we're thinking about that, we need to consider what happens if they completely bomb it. Everybody rolls ones, everybody just, nobody gets any success, any net successes on the board. Failure and loss. So at great cost to the character, they fail. But, and this is going to be important, but you need to give them a new lead to follow. I remember I was playing a D&D game and we were in a giant stronghold. And of course, we were playing D&D, so no one was playing a strength character, because why play a strength character in D&D? There was a door. It was like just a random door that giants can open at normal. And then you have all these dex and charisma based characters that are trying to open this giant's door, and nobody had the strength to do it. And we literally just sat there scratching our heads. It became a problem solving scenario, but it wasn't even in a fun way. It's just the GM, but bless his heart, just had no idea. It's like, I really was not prepared for you guys to not be able to open a door. Who thinks about that? But we ended up finding a way forward. We had to craft a way forward on the spot. Now, as the GM, you can come into this scenario pre-thinking, pre-gaming, pre-guide with an idea ahead of in this scene, what does it mean if the players absolutely fail? Now, again, following the model that we got off of Burning World, I think we pulled some of the things like the results come with unwelcome news or a great complication. The party gets captured, the princess and other castle, so on and so forth. I think that came from Adam Coble. As a matter of fact, I want to make sure I give credit where credit's due, but you get that whole idea. It's like maybe the players have become wanted fugitives because they messed up that bad. Like whatever it is, like you're not out of the game. It's just this is a dead end. You need to retreat, and there needs to be a new way forward that is less optimal, that has more complications, that has more long-term implications. You need to be able to have that. So that is the first thing that we really, really need to come up with here. The shades of success. So with that in mind, you've already like just above and beyond uh, the metric you need to craft a successful campaign, successful gaming experience. So with that said, we have covered shades of success. Now the next point is that we want to make them work for it. How do we make them work for it? Well, we don't just give it like we have expected our players to succeed. We obviously don't want to just give them the answers and the results. Otherwise, we'd just be watching movies. So, with a firm idea what your victory conditions are for a scene and what your shades of success will look like, now it's time to involve the players. And how do we do that? I like to have everybody contribute to a scene. I don't care if you're a combat character in a social encounter or a social character in an exploration encounter. I believe everybody should find a way to contribute. So again, this works for all systems that use skill checks, and that's the skill challenge. Basically, skill challenge is an excellent way for groups to solve puzzles, handle stretches of exploration, prepare for a heist, a siege, gather information towards a specific end. Most importantly, skill challenges involve every player in these scenes. All members of the party can use a relevant skill to contribute to the overall success of the challenge. Now, this is where you're going to have to get a little bit creative. You're going to have to ask people like, hey, this is a talking scenario. What is my fighter doing? It's like, oh, I don't know. I'm like checking people out to see if anyone's got any hidden weapons. Like, okay, great, let it happen. Or, I'm just going to stand here looking all intimidating. I mean, find something, find a way for them to contribute, find a way for them to play into that. But anyway, so they all use a relevant skill, and then characters who critically succeed, or they succeed by a great margin. Like, so if we're talking about DCs and you've got like a 13 DC for low level characters, and somebody rolls like a 19 and they've got like 5 or 10 more than what they need, give them 2 successes. Someone who fails, like, okay, you didn't get anything, or just whatever seems natural and organic. And this way, you're also balancing your shades of success. So, because a character is not great at contributing at a particular scene, he can still attempt. And even if he fails, you've got the person who's going to shine. Maybe they are going to be more likely to have the critical success, or and that's going to count for 2 successes for them. So after all your successes and failures have been tallied, compare whatever your results are to your predetermined target number. That's where it falls on the shades of success. So even if the party doesn't meet the target number, again, like we talked about with the success and great cost, it doesn't mean that they fail. Depending on which skills were failed, there might be added consequences or hazards to the group. Or I'm sorry, there might be added consequences that the group may face. So give your group a chance to narrate the outcome, develop notes that can be used for or against the characters in the future, as you referenced the Shades of Success section. So those are skill challenges. And then there's straight checks. Now, straight checks is probably the bread and butter of how you've been running things, how most systems are designed to run it. If it's been successful, by all means, don't fix what isn't broken. There's always going to be a place for this kind of resolution. So it's being mentioned, but I'm going to give a little bit of context that goes along with the rest of what's going on here. Outside of a skill challenge, an individual player might desire to discover a little bit more or just play around a bit in the campaign world you created. So it's important to honor this kind of agency. Just make sure it does not take away from the overall direction of the story or step on the agency of other players. If the objective can be completed with a single check from a single player, then do that. If it leads to a player needing to make follow-up checks, please consider opening up to a skill challenge. One thing I hate, I love play rogues. I love to play rogues. I love to play rogues. However, when I want to do something, I want it to be a roll and done because I don't like taking away all the spotlight. I don't want to roll to be silent, move silently, roll to be stealthy, roll to pick the pocket, roll to create a distraction, roll to do. It seems like as a character, I am doing a skill challenge by myself. Now, when a single character is doing a skill challenge and you're playing in a game of party, if it's a single party player game, fine. But when you're doing that, it feels like as a player, you are just waiting for me to fail. So I'm begging you, GMs, please consider not doing that. If you know the player wants to do something and you know it's going to be more than one roll, say, hey, this is going to be a little bit more complex than just a straight check. Do you want to involve the group and potentially make it a skill challenge? And then we go back to the real stat. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's great. It's everybody's involved. There's tension. There's fun. There's rewards. All that things. All players are involved. All players are being honored. I'm sorry, their agency is being honored. So, what happens when you fail? You fail, right? Okay, great. We're going to talk about pushing the check. Standard games would have you make a check and accept the results, pass or fail. Now, this is an optional rule. This is part of my core system because it plays into something later on that we'll talk about. But this is an optional rule that players can push the check on a failed attempt to get another roll. So one thing that I've also noticed is there's like, oh, let me try this. Like, well, it didn't work. Well, we're stuck. Okay, well, someone else try the same check. Oh, I hate that. Or let me just wait a little bit and I'll do this again. That's actually a little bit more on brand, but immediately re-rolling after a failed attempt. We already see it in a lot of our games. Now we need a little bit of a subsystem to try to honor what that does, what that means, and bring tension to those scenarios instead of I'm just going to sit around here and wait until my roll passes. So I made the check, I failed. I'm going to push the check to get another roll. Now in my system, you have to have a specific trait that lets you push the check on a failed roll. But you can open it up if you want to. Either way, this is a great way to ratchet up tension inside a scene that allows players a chance to redeem themselves. Obviously, this should not come for free. So we're going to check these tables here, and we're going to come up with a appropriate and agreed upon cost and consequence for failure. So let me come over here. Okay, pushing the check. So what we're going to do is we are going to say, you may push the check, but in order to do so, you have to expend a resource. That resource can be time. That resource can be money. You could incur a favor. You could maybe loan, like all of these things are very, very generic. And again, it really depends on what the scene calls for. When you're improvising, it's a lot harder to come up with these. So I put this chart out just to give me a reference to come up with something that makes sense in the moment. Push the check by expending resources. Tip off interest. This is a big one. Like you're trying to do something quietly, you're trying to do something silently. Like, hey, you can try it again, but there's a greater chance for someone to be aware of what you're trying to do. Maybe it would be you do it, but like you get a paper cut or you slice your finger or whatever. So give them like, hey, you're allowed to do this, but it causes damage to you. And that way we can bring damage into the realm outside of combat. And it makes players leverage their resources to keep themselves topped up or whatnot outside of combat. We're jeopardizing an item of value or importance. So maybe what it is we're trying to steal a painting from a gallery and we're trying to cut it out of the frame so we can roll it up. What happens if you slip and you accidentally cut the painting and devalue it? I mean, that's just an idea. Now, here comes the horrible part. What if we fail our push to check challenge? Well, here's a list of that. You have actively alerted an external force. Your reward is lessened or partially destroyed, like your painting. You destroyed your painting. A combat encounter ensues. Like I said, maybe that is the right answer for a critical failure. Maybe in the process of doing it, you break a law or you are discovered breaking the law. You again take more damage. An inconvenient call or call of a favor is owed. Yeah, that's something we're going to talk about here in a minute. So I don't want to give away too much on that. Let's say you're trying to activate an item or trying to steal a magic item and it accidentally goes off and it's a one fireball and bam, everybody's in a fireball formation while you're trying to steal a relatively innocent item. Misleading evidence is another good one. We're going to get into some of this in just a minute, I swear. Leave incriminating evidence at the scene. Yeah, all this. I'm just going to go ahead and move forward with this. Again, these charts are here for a very, very good reason because it's not always easy to insert this into your campaign prep time. A lot of the stuff is going to come up in your improv. Either way, take a pause, write these things down, add to it, be aware of this mechanic. I think it's going to really, really add some tension. And we're about to go into all the things that I've been hinting at, but failing to mention. So in the beginning, we talked about having victory conditions, say just shades of success. We've allowed for player involvement with the skill challenges, the straight checks, and then the pushing the check. Now we get to design and implement an extra twist that is 100% player determined and driven. All their plotting and bargaining while they've been chasing their objectives is about to pay off. Now we make the world turn. As the world turns, to represent a living, breathing world that exists around the PCs, it's going to be useful to have a mechanic in place that represents a specific threat that may be randomly encountered by the players as opposed to the players randomly encountering it. It's important to note this is an extra threat that is developed from player interaction within the session. Have they been too brash in their approach? I don't know. Have they tipped off involvement to a third shadow party? Have they trekked about too clumsily and alerted a predator? All of those things we were talking about in the results of the pushing the check. This is where it comes in. We are going to build a counter that ticks down to this lurking threat. Now, when the players have enough failures, and this goes back into that whole thing, the failure or the success but at a cost, or the pushing the check. In my system, every time a player pushes the check, they add to this counter. So when the players have enough failures or they push their checks too many times, I'm going to drop this bomb on them. As the counter builds, I'm going to let the players know that something's coming. I'm going to build the tension. I'm going to drop clues to announce its inevitable arrival, even if it's just a gut feeling of impending doom or unease. An example of these threats could be a random NPC who delivers a personal vendetta against the players, a roving sub-boss or a band of scouts or guards, or a thief that steals an important plot item or just robs them blind. Like, have some fun, keep it fresh, mix it up. When I put my players in an exploration scene, these are the things that I have going on. These are the things that I know that I want them to do. And then I want them to get through the forest, get out of the forest, move on to the next scene. Now, here is something else that I want to throw into, especially in an exploration scene. I want a super monster, like a Hydra or just some big nasty monster that randomly roves the woods. Um, I am not counting on my players to encounter this creature. If they get through forest successfully, they can completely avoid this encounter altogether. So it would be a random encounter that you would find and publish in a lot of your mods. Um, instead of rolling randomly to encounter this, instead of rolling randomly for these encounters, this is something that is going to happen when the failures start to rise to the surface, when they're pushing the check too hard. I want this to happen. And instead of it being random, it's going to be sewn into my campaign and I'm going to be seeding them. Like, let's say they're trying to disarm a trap. Like, hey, you disarm a trap. It goes off in the distance and creates a huge noise. And you see birds fly everywhere. And you hear a roar in the distance. Like, uh-oh, that's tension. The trouble is not on them right now, but they know something's coming. There's a predator out in those woods. And this is the way that we're going to bring this in. I think I've made a colossal mess of this whole system or this whole idea. I think that this is a really critical thing, and my players have had a lot of fun with it. I'm just having a really hard time explaining exactly how it works. Basically, I just want to sum this up. When we're counting failures and when we're counting the number of pushing the checks, we have this counter that they are ticking down to. It's an external dial that is going to be threatening the players. Yeah, have that in mind. Bring that to bear. It's going to be a lot of fun. Trust me. Oh yeah, the other thing. Okay, so maybe through party chatter, they're like, "Oh, if we do this, then this is going to happen. Oh no, if we do this, this is going to." Listen to that. Honor that. I'm not saying that just because the player says it, you have to throw a gotcha moment on them. But if it makes sense, listen to your players. Bring their paranoias into it. Play off of them. Honor their paranoia to an extent. Don't overplay your hand because then you'll have players that are afraid to do anything. You don't want that. Anyway, I've said enough on that. We're going to move on. Leading room. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Let's see. So we talked about shades of success. We've talked about making players work for it in the form of skill challenges, straight checks, and pushing the check. We've talked about leaving rooms for surprise, which as the world mechanics. Now we're going to talk about having some fun. Now, this is all about spicing things up, mixing it. We're going to try a couple alternate conflict resolution mechanics. This one I like to call the summation of an ordeal. Let me share this here. There we go. So when used as an in-game narrative conflict resolution mechanic, such as a race, a chase, an archery contest, uh, a jury trial, even a siege, an entire siege of town, you can present a series of these checks here to show a long and drawn out in-game affair that does not take too much actual table time. Basically, you're going to make in a series of checks. You're going to decide the results as best 2 out of 3, 3 out of 5, etc. When the results are tallied, you're going to narrate the outcome based on the following scale. Now, again, we go back to the idea of shades of success. This is how those numbers are going to look on that shades of success table. Again, you can do long drawn out affairs and just, hey, we're going to do a series of 3 to 5 rolls. I found out that this is probably the best way to handle chases and archery contests, wrestling contests, sniper duels, whatever it is. It comes up not often, but it's fun. It's different. It just keeps things fresh. It keeps things fresh and it keeps things simple. Number one design concept. Number one design principle. Keep it simple. Cut to the heart of what you're trying to intend. And sometimes this is going to do it. Next, we're going to have story contest. This is particularly fun because it is rock, paper, scissors at your tabletop. Sometimes all you need to determine the outcome of the exploration or social encounter is the approach that the players are going to take to it. So no role is required, and there's really not a whole lot of room for shades of success. So this is going to basically go back to your straight check, only without the check part. You can use this mechanic to systematically clear non-sequential rooms. I'm sorry, non-consequential rooms in a complex dungeon without taking up too much table time, and make a first impression on an important NPC. Uh, so on and so forth. It basically the contact is going to be a rock paper scissors style, where each opponent chooses a maneuver against a predetermined outcome in a double blind fashion. That's just like a very complex way of saying we're both playing rock paper scissors. After the after you sorry after this, you either declare contest over or resume with some other option, like a straight check, a skill challenge, or even tactical combat. But this is going to get us to there. Uh, I said rock, paper, scissors. These are the different type of approaches that can be used. Straightforward, I think these really speak for themselves. I hope these speak for themselves. Straightforward as rock, cautious as paper, clever as scissor. Find ways to allow your characters to narrate what they're doing, determine from what they're doing, and then as the GM, you can roll a random using this random table if you don't want to have a predetermined whichever. Okay, so as the GM, you already know how the NPCs behave. You already know how the world works. You already know all this stuff. It might be wise for you when playing these scenes and knowing that a story contest is coming up. You already have the idea of what your NPC is going to throw, whether it be rock, paper, scissors, whether they respond well to a straightforward, cautious, or a clever approach, or whether they'll be tricked by it. Either way, you've got that idea. So this would be a chance for your characters who have invested in insight skills to be able to glean from the campaign as it exists the idea that, hey, this guy's going to go throw a rock, so I need to go throw paper. Please allow for that. Don't be turned off by it. I've given you 3 different dice to roll this on, to figure this out on: a D3, a D6, and a D12. What you roll is based off of, or what you roll determines whether the NPC in question is going to use the straightforward, cautious, or clever approach, completely randomized. If you don't have it pre-planned. Anyway, again, I'm sorry. I've been blown up a lot, so my brain's kind of scattered. I have the document available for anybody that would like to download it. Just contact me. I will get it to you. This is a very important resource that I have used as a game master because, like I said, I've been blown up a lot. I have great, big, grand ideas of what I want to happen, and I always get lost in the details when I'm at a table. I always hyper focus on the wrong things. I forget to listen to players. So anything that I can do to just smooth the waters, make things calm, make things very straightforward, have a really quick cheat sheet for me to look at so I can play off of that. All these things are just immensely valuable for me as a person, for me as a GM. And I wanted to share that because I've seen it happen enough. And a lot of my other friends who like the GM, I'm like, hey, I see you struggling here. This might help. And I've talked to them. They said that they like the ideas. I really just hope that this can help you be the best game master that you could possibly be and navigate those encounters that are not necessarily combat based, because that seems to be the place where a lot of people struggle. Wow, that's a lot of talking. Okay, I'm done. I swear to God, I'm done. So like I said, all this stuff that I use here, or all the stuff in this document, these ideas that we've talked about, I use these as fundamental principles that I have designed my own system, the hero experience, around. I use all of this stuff. It's directly inserted into the meta of the system, along with other things. But please, if you're interested, if you like kind of the way I think about things, the way I bring things together, obviously not the way that I present things. Please overlook that because I'm really, really bad at this. Great game designer, horrible speaker. Yeah, not very. Anyway, here it is. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's helpful. I hope that you will use it. Please let me know in the comments if you're using it. Um, yeah, I guess that's it. I'm done. Have a good time. I'd link it in my Patreon, but my Patreon's a mess right now. I don't even know if I'm trying to even charge anybody for this stuff. It's just a passion of mine. So we'll see how it goes. I might leave my Patreon in the comments, but really, I just want to make one-on-one connections with people. Reach out to me, and we'll talk more about it. Thanks, everybody. Hope you have a great day. Again, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.